I never thought I'd be sitting here telling you this, but here I am, still reeling from the shock, still feeling the phantom sting on my cheek. My daughter-in-law, the woman my son married, slapped me. Not a playful tap, not an accidental brush, but a full-force, open-handed smack right across my face. And then, as if that wasn't enough, she had the audacity, the sheer unmitigated gall, to demand the keys to my house. My house. The home I've lived in for 40 years, the place where I raised my son, where I watched him take his first steps and say his first words. I'm still struggling to understand how it came to this. Was I wrong to hold my ground? Was I wrong to refuse her? Tell me, honestly, what would you have done if your own daughter-in-law, a woman you had welcomed into your family with open arms, had suddenly turned on you in such a horrific way, all for the sake of something that was rightfully yours? It all started subtly, insidiously, a slow creep of disrespect that I, in my naive optimism, mistook for youthful exuberance or just a different way of doing things. My son, Mark, met Sarah about 5 years ago. He was 30, she was 28. Mark had always been a good boy, a bit quiet, but kind and considerate. He'd had a few girlfriends before, but none he'd seemed truly serious about until Sarah. When he first introduced her to me, I tried my best to be welcoming. She was strikingly beautiful. I'll give her that. Long, dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a confident, almost assertive demeanor. At first, I found her energy a little overwhelming, a stark contrast to Mark's more laid-back nature. But I told myself that opposites attract, and if my son was happy, then I would be happy for him. They dated for about a year, and during that time, Sarah slowly started to make her presence felt in our family, not just with Mark, but with me as well. She'd offer unsolicited advice about my home decor, suggest I change my gardening habits, and even comment on my cooking, always with a smile, always framed as a helpful suggestion. I'd just smile back, a little bewildered, and mostly ignore her, attributing it to her trying to find her place. Then came the wedding. It was a beautiful affair, and I remember feeling a bittersweet joy watching my son, so handsome and happy, marry the woman he loved. I gave them a generous wedding gift, a substantial amount that I had saved specifically for Mark's future. I wanted them to have a good start. After the wedding, they initially moved into a small apartment not too far from my house. I thought that would be a good distance, allowing them their independence while still being close enough for regular visits. But Sarah had other ideas. Within a few months, she started complaining about the apartment. Too small, too noisy, not enough natural light. She'd bring it up constantly, especially when she was at my house. "Oh, Mrs. Davis," she'd say, looking around my spacious, well-maintained home. "Your kitchen is just divine. So much counter space. I can barely chop a vegetable in our tiny little galley kitchen. Or, this garden is just lovely. Imagine having a proper backyard like this for entertaining." I initially brushed these comments off as mere observations, but they became more frequent, more pointed. One evening, about a year into their marriage, Mark called me. He sounded stressed. He told me that Sarah was really unhappy with their apartment and that she had suggested a temporary arrangement. They move into my house for a few months while they looked for something more suitable. My heart sank. I loved my son, but I also cherished my independence and the peace of my own home. I had downsized after my husband passed, and this house, while not huge, was perfect for me. It was my sanctuary. I gently tried to explain this to Mark, telling him I wasn't sure it was a good idea, that it might be too disruptive for all of us. Mark, bless his heart, tried to mediate. He said it would only be for a short time, maybe 3 or 4 months at most, and that Sarah was really pushing for it. He even mentioned that it would save them money, which they could then put towards a down payment on their own house. I reluctantly agreed. I couldn't say no to my son when he sounded so desperate. I laid down some ground rules, though. They would contribute to the groceries and utilities, they would respect my space, and it was strictly temporary. Sarah was present during this conversation, nodding along, all smiles and assurances. "Of course, Mrs. Davis," she'd said, "will be no trouble at all. We're so grateful for your generosity." Those 3 or 4 months stretched into 6, then 8, then a full year. The temporary arrangement became a permanent fixture. Sarah started to treat my house as if it were her own. She rearranged my kitchen cupboards, decided to paint the living room a color I detested without even asking me, and even started throwing out some of my beloved, old furniture, claiming it was dated and cluttering up the space. I tried to speak up, gently at first, but she'd just brush me off with a dismissive wave of her hand or a patronizing smile, saying, "Oh, Mrs. Davis, trust me, this is much better. You'll thank me later." Mark, caught in the middle, would often just look away, uncomfortable, clearly not wanting to confront his wife. He became quieter, more withdrawn. I saw him less and less, as Sarah seemed to monopolize his time and attention. I felt like a guest in my own home, tiptoeing around, afraid to upset her. My once peaceful sanctuary felt like a battleground, a place where I was constantly on edge. My friends noticed it too. They'd come over and raise an eyebrow at the new decor, or quietly ask if everything was all right. I'd just sigh and tell them it was complicated. The financial aspect became another point of contention. Despite our agreement, their contributions to household expenses were sporadic at best. I found myself footing most of the bills, and when I gently reminded Sarah about it, she'd always have an excuse: a sudden unexpected expense, a larger-than-anticipated car repair, or some other pressing need. Mark would look embarrassed, promise to talk to her, but nothing would change. I saw my savings slowly dwindling, and a cold fear began to settle in my heart. This wasn't just about my peace of mind anymore, it was about my financial security. I had worked hard all my life, and I had a comfortable retirement planned, but their presence was eroding it, slowly but surely. One day, I decided enough was enough. I gathered my courage and approached Mark directly. I told him, as calmly as I could, that I needed them to start looking for their own place again, that this arrangement simply wasn't working for me anymore. I explained how I felt like I had lost my home, my privacy, and that my finances were suffering. Mark listened, his face etched with worry. He promised he would talk to Sarah, that he would make her understand. A few days later, he came to me, looking defeated. "Mom," he said, "Sarah is really upset. She thinks you're being unreasonable. She said we're helping you, keeping you company, and that you should be grateful." My jaw dropped. Grateful? For being walked all over in my own home? For being financially exploited? I realized then that Sarah had completely twisted the narrative in her mind, or perhaps deliberately manipulated it for her own benefit. The tension in the house became unbearable. Silent treatments, passive-aggressive comments, and an atmosphere so thick with unspoken resentment you could cut it with a knife. I felt like I was living in a psychological prison. I tried to reach out to Sarah, to have a heart-to-heart, but she always deflected, always made me feel like I was the one being difficult. I even suggested family counseling, hoping a neutral third party could help us communicate, but she flat out refused, saying there was nothing wrong with our family. It felt like she was deliberately trying to isolate me, to make me feel crazy for wanting my own life back. My relationship with Mark, my only son, was suffering immensely. He was torn between his wife and his mother, and it was clear he was struggling. I hated seeing him like that, but I also knew I couldn't continue living this way. I was losing myself. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I was living under my own roof, but it felt like I was a stranger in my own home. My daughter-in-law had taken over, and my son, my own flesh and blood, was too afraid or too unwilling to stand up to her. My savings were dwindling, and my peace of mind was non-existent. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. How much more would you have taken before you stood your ground? What would your breaking point have been? My breaking point came one Tuesday morning. I woke up early, as I always do, and went to make my coffee. As I walked into the kitchen, I saw Sarah sitting at my kitchen table, scrolling through something on her phone, a smug look on her face. She had a set of house keys jingling in her hand. Not my spare set, which I always kept in a specific drawer, but my main set, the one I used every day. My heart pounded. "Sarah," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, "what are you doing with my keys?" She looked up, a slow smile spreading across her face, completely devoid of warmth. "Oh, these," she said, dangling them provocatively. "Mark gave them to me. He said it's time I had my own set. After all, this is our home now, isn't it?" My blood ran cold. My son had given her my keys, without even discussing it with me. It was a betrayal. It was the ultimate declaration that I was no longer the mistress of my own home. "No, Sarah," I said, my voice rising. "This is my home. And those are my keys. Give them back." She scoffed, her smile widening into a sneer. "Don't be ridiculous, Mrs. Davis. Mark and I live here now. We're going to put our names on the deed. He said he's going to talk to you about it later today.
That was it. The dam broke.
All the pent-up frustration, the hurt, the feeling of being violated, it all surged to the surface. You are not putting your names on my deed. I practically screamed, my voice cracking.
This is my house. You were supposed to be here temporarily.
You have overstayed your welcome, you have disrespected me, and you have taken advantage of my son's good nature and my generosity. Her eyes narrowed, the smugness replaced by a cold fury. She stood up, slowly, deliberately, and walked towards me. How dare you speak to me like that, old woman? She hissed, her voice low and menacing. This house should have been Mark's inheritance anyway. We're just taking what's rightfully ours. And then, without another word, she raised her hand and slapped me. The force of it made my head snap to the side. A sharp, stinging pain erupted on my cheek. I stumbled back, clutching my face, my mind reeling in disbelief. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't believe what had just happened. Before I could even fully process the physical assault, she thrust the keys at me, not in an act of returning them, but with a forceful demand. Now, give me your keys, or I'll make sure you regret it. She wasn't asking, she was telling me. She wanted both sets, to ensure I had no access, no control. At that exact moment, Mark walked into the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. His eyes widened when he saw me clutching my red, burning cheek, and Sarah standing over me, her face contorted in a mask of rage, holding what he recognized as my house keys. "What happened?" he yelled, rushing between us. "Sarah, what did you do?" Sarah immediately went into victim mode, tears welling up in her eyes. "She attacked me, Mark." She just started screaming and tried to grab the keys from my hand. "She's going crazy." Mark looked from her tear-streaked face to my reddened cheek, his expression a mix of confusion and horror. But the sight of my physical pain, the clear evidence of an assault, seemed to finally break through his denial. "Mom, what is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. I didn't even need to speak. The truth was etched on my face. I looked at Mark, my heart breaking for the kind, gentle boy he once was. "Mark," I said, my voice hoarse. She slapped me. "And she demanded my keys. She said this house is hers now." Mark turned to Sarah, a flicker of something I hadn't seen in his eyes in a long time, anger. "Sarah, is this true?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. Sarah, seeing her carefully constructed facade crumbling, tried to bluster. "It was an accident." She provoked me. But Mark wasn't buying it. He knew his mother. He knew I would never provoke anyone, let alone him or his wife, to that extent. He walked over to her, gently but firmly took the keys from her hand, and gave them back to me. "Mom, I am so sorry," he whispered, his eyes filled with shame and regret. Then he turned back to Sarah, his face hardening. "Sarah, pack your bags. We're leaving. Today." Sarah was stunned. "Leaving? Mike, what are you talking about? This is our home." Mark shook his head. "No, Sarah. This is my mother's home. And you have absolutely no right to treat her this way, or to demand anything from her. I can't believe you did this." The argument escalated, but this time, Mark wasn't mediating. He was standing up for me. He told her in no uncertain terms that he would not tolerate her disrespect towards his mother, and that her behavior was unforgivable. He told her she had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Sarah, realizing she had lost her grip on him, began to cry hysterically, but it was too late. Mark was resolute. Within hours, they were gone. Mark helped Sarah pack her things, a grim silence hanging between them. He gave me a tearful hug before they left, apologizing profusely, telling me he had been blind and foolish, and that he should have listened to me sooner. I told him I loved him, and that I just wanted him to be happy, truly happy. He said he understood. After they drove away, an eerie silence settled over the house. It felt strange, almost hollow, but also peaceful. I sat down at my kitchen table, the keys now firmly in my hand, and just cried. Tears of relief, tears of exhaustion, tears for the brokenness of what was once a loving family dynamic. The aftermath was difficult, as expected. Sarah refused to speak to Mark for weeks. She moved in with a friend and tried to turn mutual friends against me, painting me as the cruel, unyielding mother-in-law who had kicked her own son out. But the truth, as it often does, eventually came out. Mark, in his shame, eventually confided in a few close family members and friends, admitting what had truly happened. Most people sided with me, appalled by Sarah's behavior. Mark and Sarah eventually reconciled, but their marriage was irrevocably changed. The trust was broken, and I could tell that Mark saw Sarah in a completely different light. They ended up moving to a different city a few months later, for a fresh start, as Mark put it. Our relationship, Mark's and mine, slowly began to heal. He started visiting more often, just him, and we'd talk for hours, reconnecting, rebuilding the bond that had been strained for so long.
He promised me he would never let anyone treat me that way again. And I believe him.
My house is once again my sanctuary, filled with peace and the warmth of my memories. The sting on my cheek faded, but the lesson it taught me about standing up for myself, about protecting my home and my peace, will stay with me forever. It was a devastating experience, a truly shocking betrayal, but I learned a valuable lesson about boundaries and self-worth. Sometimes, you have to be the one to draw the line, no matter how difficult it is, to protect what's yours and what matters most. Like this video if you were on my side in this whole ordeal. Subscribe for more stories like this, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below.
I'll see you all in the next story.